China is again encroaching on the airspace of its democratic neighbor, Taiwan. Here is what we know. Taiwan Central News Agency reports that 2 Chinese warplanes briefly crossed the centerline of the Taiwan Strait and intruded in Taiwan's air defense identification zone at 9 a.m. on Monday, August 10th, citing the Ministry of National Defense's Air Force Command headquarters. According to CNA, Taiwanese Air Force patrol planes intercepted the Chinese fighter jets, which were identified as a J-11 and a J-10. The Taiwanese aircraft issued radio warnings. The intruding planes then retreated to the Chinese side of the median line. Taiwan possesses ground-based advanced warning radars, including a PAVE PAWS unit in the northern mountains of Leshan that can track missiles and warplanes from China. Writing in Forbes, defense correspondent David Axe speculates Taiwan's armed forces would have spotted the Chinese planes the moment they took off. Citing an air defense expert, China's state-run Global Times complained that Taiwan also utilized a missile-cueing radar to monitor the Chinese jets, which the expert said was like pointing a sniper rifle at them. Never mind that China was the party that got on Taiwan's lawn. The incident occurred one day after U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services Alex Azar's historic visit to Taiwan. Azar, the highest-profile U.S. official to visit Taiwan in 41 years, arrived in a transport plane that landed at Songshan Airport in Taipei. Like a schoolyard bully, old Winnie the Shi just can't seem to mind his own darn business. Fortunately, Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen is not having any of Xi's nonsense and has embarked on military reforms to defend the island's nation's vibrant democracy. Those reforms are sorely needed since China is pathologically unable to leave well enough alone.
As the world is distracted by the coronavirus pandemic, China has stepped up military activities all over the place aimed at intimidating or provoking its neighbors. There was Monday's attack in the Himalayas that left 20 Indian soldiers dead at last count and dozens missing. Pressures in Malaysia and Indonesia in the South China Sea, the ramming of a Vietnamese fishing boat last week. But we're particularly worried about what now looks like a deliberate pattern of escalations over the Taiwan Strait. Here is what you need to know. Taiwan's Air Force on June 17th again warned off Chinese warplanes that approached the country, the Defense Ministry said, reporting the 4th such intrusion in just 9 days. The Chinese J-10, a fighter jet, and Y-8, a turboprop surveillance aircraft, entered Taiwan's air defense identification zone to the southwest of the country on Wednesday. Taiwanese fighter planes issued a verbal warning to the Chinese aircraft to leave, and the Chinese planes immediately left the air defense identification zone. The latest incursion came just 1 day after a J-10 fighter entered Taiwan's air defense identification zone from the southwest. It was issued radio warnings to leave and then escorted out of Taiwanese airspace. That followed a flight in the same area on June 12th by a Chinese Y-8, which was issued a verbal warning by Taiwan's Air Force to leave its airspace. The Y-8 flight came only a few hours after Taiwan announced it had conducted missile tests at 2 locations off its eastern coast. Taiwan did not say what missiles were tested, but Tiancong-3 surface-to-air missiles and Yongfeng land attack cruise missiles were tested in the same area in April. Such incursions were rare until a year ago, when in March of 2019, 2 Chinese J-11 fighter jets crossed over the median line in the Taiwan Strait for the first time in years. Beijing also sailed its Shandong aircraft carrier through the strait in December, shortly before Taiwan's presidential election. Hours after a U.S. transport plane made a rare flight over Taiwan, a group of Chinese warplanes entered Taiwanese airspace. Taiwan's Air Force scrambled planes to warn off multiple Chinese fighter jets that had briefly entered Taiwan's air defense identification zone on June 9th, the country's defense ministry said in a statement. The Su-30 fighters, some of China's most advanced jets, were issued verbal warnings to leave, and Taiwanese Air Force jets drove away the intruders, the ministry said. The military has full surveillance and control of all activities in the sea and air that surround Taiwan, and the public can rest assured of our capability to uphold security for our national territory, the ministry said. The Defense Ministry confirmed that a U.S. C-48 transport plane had just hours before passed over Taiwan with permission near Taipei before heading south along the country's coast. The incident occurred a day after the commander of the U.S. 7th Fleet confirmed that the guided missile destroyer USS Russell had passed through the Taiwan Strait the previous week. This was the U.S. Navy's 7th such transit this year and second in 2 weeks, According to a report in the Stars and Stripes, the Japan Times reports U.S. electronic warfare aircraft may have passed the strait 14 times in April alone. The Chinese incursion also came hours after Taiwan's defense ministry announced the country's annual Han-Kwang exercises, which had been postponed due to the coronavirus, will be conducted in July and September, Taiwan's central news agency reports. The annual exercises test the country's capabilities to ward off attacks from China's People's Liberation Army. Amidst a deadly global pandemic, China is planning to rattle sabers against Taiwan with major military exercise, according to the Japanese press. China's People Liberation Army Navy plans to conduct a large-scale amphibious assault drill off Hainan Island in August. Citing unnamed Chinese sources, the Japan Times reports the drill will involve landing ships, hovercraft, and helicopters, while the carrier Shandong has been deployed in Hainan since December last year. According to the Japan Times, the exercise is designed to simulate a Navy and Marines attack on the Taiwan-held Pratas, a strategically important islet that sits astride China's military egress from Hainan to the Pacific Ocean. Tensions between Beijing and Taipei rose after Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen was elected into office in 2016, on a wave of popular anger against the pro-Beijing policies of her predecessor Ma Ying-jeou. According to Reuters, Taiwan in April announced plans to buy arms from France to upgrade its fleet of 6 French-made Lafayette-class frigates. Responding to protests from Beijing, France's foreign ministry suggests China should focus on battling COVID-19 instead. En anglais, it means go pound the sand. The U.S. Naval Institute reports a U.S. Navy Arleigh-Burke-class destroyer made a transit through the Taiwan Strait to warn Beijing's leadership against taking aggressive action in the region. The Japan Times reports U.S. electronic warfare aircraft may have passed the strait 14 times in April alone. According to Taiwan's state-run central news agency, a Chinese Y-8 aircraft flew into Taiwan's air defense identification zone before being headed off by fighter jets on April 8th. This is the 7th time Chinese military planes flew near Taiwan's airspace this year. For more news animations and explainers, hit the subscribe and bell button to join the TomoNews family. Thanks for watching.